Hello, my lovely anatomist and physiologist, Michele here, and thank you for joining me for chapter 17, which is all about the endocrine system. Don't forget, there are always links in the video descriptions to your textbook as well as your study materials, so make sure you're checking that out. When we talk about the endocrine system, we're talking about one of two body systems that is involved in body communication. So when we're talking about body communication, the two key body systems that we're talking about are the nervous system, which we've already explored in a lot of detail, and the endocrine system, which is, of course, our topic for chapter 17. Let's do a quick comparison of these two systems. When we talk about the nervous system, I do like to think of this as quick communication. We can talk about it as being very localized. We can talk about it as being very rapid, meaning the communication happens quickly, but then it's also very brief. So it's like a quick signal and then the signal stops kind of thing. We are, in the case of the nervous system, doing both electrical signaling, which we've talked about in our previous discussions, and we're also doing chemical signaling, which of course involves our neurotransmitter. And then the nervous system we can also talk about as responding to really external stimuli. When we talk about the endocrine system, then we should think about this as being widespread as opposed to localized. It's going to be slower for the signal to kind of make its way to the tissue that it's like talking to, but then we're also going to see that it's going to be a more longer lasting type of response, type of signal. We're going to see here chemical signaling exclusively used, and we're going to see that the chemical involved in the signaling is called a hormone, which we've talked about just a little bit in the past, and we're going to go into that in more detail here. We see that instead of really responding to the external stimuli, the endocrine system is more responding to the internal stimuli. And we'll see that it's mostly regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. And when we talk about negative feedback, remember this means we're going in the opposite direction of the stimulus. And so I always think about the negative feedback as a figure 8. So if we go too high, we bring it low. If we go too low, we bring it high. And so we're constantly kind of doing this figure 8 pattern around that kind of steady set point. Now, the thing that we'll see that both of these body systems have in common is that they are both going to be involved in either the body communication, or we can talk about that as regulating homeostasis. And very often we see that they are working in concert with each other to sort of achieve this common goal. We are talking about body communication. We're looking at, the whole thing, right? So let's take just a few minutes and talk about the different ways that cells communicate with each other. So we're going to have 5 different methods that we can talk about. One is our synaptic communication, which we have been talking about extensively starting in A&P1 when we got into chapter 10 of our skeletal muscle, and we talked about the control of skeletal muscle. And then we've been talking about it at the end of A&P1 when we start talking about the nervous system, and we go into the details of that. And then, of course, all of our conversations about the somatic and the autonomic nervous system and our afferent division is all involving synaptic communication. Another method of communication is described as direct communication. And this is when a signal moves from one cell to another cell via what are called gap junctions. And so a gap junction is basically, we can think of it as a channel connecting two cells together, so that if you have a lot of sodium, for instance, entering into one cell, that sodium can move directly through the gap junction into the next cell. And so that first cell was depolarized, and then that second cell can be depolarized. And so direct communication is something we'll see this semester, for instance, when we talk about cardiac muscle, and we'll see it other places as well. We also have what's called Autocrine Communication, where the auto you can think of as a cell maybe like talking to itself. So a cell releases a chemical and that actually signals to that cell, meaning the cell that released it. Yeah, so this just called this like self-talking, right? So the cell's talking to itself. We have Paracrine Communication. Paracrine Communication is often described as like a local hormone. So we can think about this as local intracellular, excuse me, I read too fast, intercellular communication. The autocrine would be sort of like an intracellular. Intra means within, inter means between. So in the paracrine communication, we're basically like a cell is releasing a chemical into the extracellular fluid, and the chemical is not going very far. We're basically talking to this one small neighborhood, if you will, of cells. And then, of course, our topic for this entire chapter is the endocrine communication. And here we talked about endocrine as being more widespread, because here the signal is going to be transported. So we have the chemical messenger transported via body fluids. And primarily that's talking about the bloodstream. And so then this is giving us like access to all of the body tissues. When we talk about those endocrine glands that are releasing these hormones, the question might be like, what is stimulating that endocrine gland to actually release hormones? And so we have 3 different types of stimuli for endocrine glands. So the first one listed here is humoral, which is just talking about body fluids. So in this case, we may have changes in blood levels of maybe nutrients. For instance, if we have changes to our level of glucose, or we might have changes to ions, which we can also think about as electrolytes. So we're able to just sense these changes and then respond accordingly. Endocrine glands can also be stimulated by hormones. So the presence of another hormone might be the signal for an endocrine gland to get busy making and releasing another hormone. And then our last example is our neural stimuli. And so typically we see either the sympathetic division or the parasympathetic division signaling this kind of regulation. All right, let's stop here. Stay tuned for our next video looking at what are the different endocrine glands. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.